In a small village called Agbor, nestled deep in the heart of Nigeria, there lived a young woman named Cordelia. Cordelia woke up before dawn, her body aching from another night on the streets. She lay on a thin layer of cardboard, her makeshift bed in an abandoned alleyway. The chill of the night still lingered, and she could see her breath as she exhaled. At 18, Cordelia had lost everything: her parents, her home, and her sense of security. As she sat up, her stomach growled, protesting the emptiness that had become all too familiar. Cordelia's eyes scanned the alley, her gaze settling on a dumpster nearby. She knew it was a long shot, but she had learned to check every possible source for food. She stood up, her joints creaking in protest, and made her way to the dumpster. The smell was overwhelming, but Cordelia's hunger drove her to dig through the trash. She found a half-eaten sandwich, the bread stale but the filling still edible. She devoured it in 2 bites, the taste bland but the satisfaction immense. With her hunger momentarily sated, Cordelia began her daily search for work. She walked through the town, her eyes scanning the streets for any sign of a job. She had learned to be resourceful, to find work wherever she could. Today she spotted a help wanted sign in the window of a local market. She pushed open the door, a bell above it ringing out, and approached the owner, a gruff but kind man named Jack. "Hey kid, you looking for work?" Jack asked, eyeing her up and down. Cordelia nodded, her eyes locked on his. "Yes sir, I'll do anything. Cleaning, sweeping, anything." Jack nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "All right kid, I'll give you a shot. $5 an hour and you can start right away." Cordelia's heart leapt with excitement. $5 an hour was a small fortune, enough to buy her a hot meal and a place to sleep for the night. She threw herself into the work, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans with a vigor that surprised even herself. As the day wore on, Cordelia's body ached, her muscles screaming for a break. But she pushed through, knowing that every hour she worked brought her closer to a better life. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack called her over, a small pile of cash in his hand. "Good job, kid," he said, pressing the money into her palm. "You're a hard worker. Come back tomorrow, and I'll give you another shift." Cordelia beamed, her eyes shining with pride. She had done it. She had survived another day. But as she left the market, her euphoria was short-lived. The streets were unforgiving, and Cordelia's appearance marked her as an outcast. People would glance at her with a mix of pity and disdain, as if she were a burden on society. Some would whisper to each other, pointing at her tattered clothes and unkempt hair. Cordelia tried to ignore them, but their words stung like a fresh wound. As night fell, Cordelia curled up in her alleyway, her eyes burning from fatigue and her heart heavy with sorrow. She felt like an invisible ghost, a shadow that haunted the streets. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried enough tears to last a lifetime. In this dark moment, Cordelia wondered if anyone would ever see beyond her tattered exterior. Beyond the label of orphan or street rat, would anyone ever look into her eyes and see the spark of hope, the flame of resilience that burned within her? As she drifted off to sleep, Cordelia held onto that spark, praying that tomorrow would bring a glimmer of light in the darkness. Cordelia woke up early, her body still aching from the previous day's labor. She lay on her makeshift bed, a thin layer of cardboard in an abandoned alleyway. The chill of the night still lingered, and she could see her breath as she exhaled. She knew she had to keep moving, to keep pushing forward. After a quick wash with cold water from a nearby fountain, Cordelia made her way to the market. Her stomach growled, protesting the emptiness that had become all too familiar. She had learned to ignore the pangs, to push through the hunger and focus on the task at hand. As she arrived at the market, Jack, the owner, greeted her with a nod. "Hey kid, ready for another day?" Cordelia nodded, her eyes scanning the market. The smell of fresh bread and fruits filled the air, enticing her senses. She threw herself into the day's tasks, determined to prove herself. She swept floors, emptied trash cans, and helped customers with their purchases. Her movements were mechanical, her mind focused on the task at hand. But despite her best efforts, Cordelia couldn't shake off the feeling of being an outcast. Her clothes were tattered, her hair unkempt, and her eyes sunken from lack of sleep. She knew she didn't fit in, that she was a stranger in a world that didn't want her. Just as Cordelia was starting to feel like she was getting the hang of things, a rude rich customer walked into the market. He was tall, with a paunchy stomach and a sneer on his face. Cordelia tried to ignore him, but he made a beeline for her, his eyes scanning her up and down. Well, he sneered. "What do we have here? A little street rat, serving food to the masses. You're a disgrace, you know that? A disgrace to society." Cordelia felt a flush rise to her cheeks, but she kept her head down, focusing on the task at hand. She had learned to ignore insults, to keep her emotions in check. But the customer wouldn't let up, his insults dripping with venom. "You're a nobody, a nothing. You don't deserve to breathe the same air as me. You're a waste of space, a waste of resources." Cordelia's eyes stung, but she refused to cry. She had cried enough tears to last a lifetime. Instead, she kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands moving mechanically as she served the customer. But the customer wouldn't leave her alone. He kept taunting her, his words cutting deep into her soul. Cordelia felt like she was drowning, like the world was closing in on her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, Jack intervened, his voice firm but kind. "Hey buddy, that's enough. Leave her alone." The customer sneered, but Jack stood his ground. "I mean it. She's a hard worker, and she deserves respect. You don't have to like her, but you don't have to be cruel either." Cordelia felt a surge of gratitude towards Jack, but the customer just laughed. "Respect? Hey, she's a nobody, a nothing. She doesn't deserve anything." Cordelia felt like she'd been punched in the gut. She knew the customer was right, that she was a nobody, a nothing. But Jack's words had given her hope, had made her feel like she was worth something. As the day drew to a close, Cordelia felt exhausted, her body and soul drained from the customer's insults. But she knew she had to keep going, had to keep pushing forward. She couldn't let the customer's words define her, couldn't let them break her. As she left the market, Cordelia felt a sense of determination wash over her. She would prove that customer wrong, would prove to herself that she was worth something. She would keep working, keep pushing, until she made a better life for herself. And as she walked away from the market, Cordelia felt a spark of hope ignite within her. She knew that tomorrow would be a better day, a day filled with promise and possibility. She would rise above the insults, above the pain, and she would make a brighter future for herself. I am God Swill, the CEO of a successful company. I'm rich, powerful, and used to getting what I want. I'm also asthmatic, but that's a secret only my closest associates know. I've learned to hide my weakness behind a mask of arrogance and bullying. As I walk into the market, I scan the room, looking for my favorite target. Cordelia, the little street rat, is working behind the counter. I can't help but sneer at her tattered clothes and unkempt hair. She's a nobody, a nothing. And she's perfect for my games. I make my way to the counter, my eyes fixed on Cordelia. She looks up, her eyes locking onto mine. I can see the fear in her eyes, the resignation. She knows what's coming. Well, I say, my voice dripping with sarcasm, if it isn't the little street rat. What's your name again, Cordelia? Or should I just call you nothing? Cordelia's eyes drop, her face flushing with shame. I laugh, enjoying the power dynamic between us. I take a seat at the counter, my eyes never leaving hers. You know, Cordelia, I only eat at this market because it's the only place where I can bully poor commoners like you. And you're my favorite target. You're so weak, so pathetic. It's almost too easy. I take a deep breath, my asthma momentarily forgotten in my excitement. Cordelia's eyes flicker up, her gaze meeting mine for a brief moment before she looks away. I mean, what's your life even worth? You're just a poor, homeless girl struggling to survive. You don't have anything I want, anything I need. You're just a nuisance, a flea on the back of society. I lean in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. But I'll keep coming back, keep bullying you, until you break, and when you do, I'll be there to laugh at you, to mock you. You're nothing, Cordelia, nothing. As I finish my meal and leave the market, I can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I've won again, bullied another poor soul into submission. And Cordelia, dear Cordelia, is my favorite toy. But as I walk away, my asthma starts to act up. I reach for my inhaler, taking a quick puff to calm my wheezing lungs. I hate being asthmatic, hate the weakness it represents. But I'll never let anyone see my vulnerability. I'll keep bullying, keep hiding behind my wealth and power. And Cordelia, poor Cordelia, will be my next victim. I'll keep coming back, keep tormenting her, until she breaks. And when she does, I'll be there to laugh at her, to mock her. She's nothing, and I'm everything. As I walk away from the market, I feel a sense of control, of power. I'm the bully, the one in charge. And Cordelia, poor Cordelia, is just a pawn in my game. I can't believe what God's will said to me today. His words cut deep like a knife to my heart. I feel like I've been punched in the gut, like all the air has been sucked out of me. I'm left gasping for breath, trying to find the strength to keep going. As I went about my work, trying to ignore the pain, I couldn't help but think about how my life used to be. My parents were alive, and we had everything. We were happy, content. We had a beautiful home, a loving family. But then they died, and everything changed. My relatives took everything we owned, chased me out of our home. They said I couldn't inherit anything because I'm not a male child. It was like they forgot that I'm their family, their blood. They forgot that I'm a human being with feelings and emotions. I remember the pain, the hurt, the feeling of being abandoned. I was left with nothing, no one to turn to. I had to fend for myself, fight for every scrap of food, every coin. I had to sleep on the streets, beg for shelter. I had to endure the harsh weather, the cold nights. And now, here I am, working in this market, trying to make a living. But people like God's Swill, they don't care. They don't see me, they don't hear me. They just see a poor, homeless girl, someone to bully, someone to mock. As I closed work today, I felt the tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I tried to hold them back, but they fell anyway. I cried for my parents, for the life we had, for the pain that I've endured. I cried for the fact that I'm still struggling, still fighting to make a living. I cried for the words that God's Swill said, for the hurt that He inflicted. I cried for the fact that I'm still alone, still unloved. I cried for the fact that I'm still struggling to find my place in this world. As I cried, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my own tears. I felt like I was losing myself, like I was disappearing into the darkness. But as I cried, I realized something. I realized that I'm not alone. There are people like me, people who have been hurt, people who have been bullied. There are people who are struggling, people who are fighting to make a living. And so I wiped away my tears and I stood up. I stood up for myself, for my parents, for the life that we had. I stood up against the pain, against the hurt. I stood up against the words that God's Swill said, against the bullying that I've endured. And I knew that I would be okay. I knew that I would make it through, that I would find a way to overcome. I knew that I would rise above the pain, above the hurt. I knew that I would find a way to heal, to move on. Because I am Cordelia, and I am strong. I am a survivor. And no matter what life throws my way, I will always find a way to rise above. I will always find a way to overcome. I'm feeling very restless at the office. I'm so bored that I can't even think straight. I keep shouting at my staff, but it's not making me feel any better. I need something more, something to get my blood pumping and my heart racing. As I sit at my desk, I can't help but think about Cordelia. That little street rat, always thinking she's so much better than me. I need to put her in her place and show her who's boss. I take my car keys and drive off to her workplace. I know she's there, and I can't wait to see the look on her face when I walk in. I'm imagining her cowering in fear, begging for mercy. As I enter the market, my eyes scan the room, searching for Cordelia. And then I see her. She's trying to hide behind the counter, but it's too late. I've already seen her. I feel a surge of excitement and power, knowing that I've got her right where I want her. I smile as I walk up to the counter. "Hi, loser," I whisper. "You think you can hide from me, huh? You think you can escape my wrath?" Cordelia's point of view. My mind skips a beat as I see God's Swill walk into the market. I know he's looking for me, and I know he's going to cause trouble. My heart starts racing and my palms get sweaty. I feel like I'm in danger. I quickly hide behind the counter, hoping to avoid his troubles. But it's too late. He's already seen me. I watch as he walks up to the counter, a smug smile on his face. "Hi, loser," he whispers. "You think you can hide from me, huh? You think you can escape my wrath?" I feel my anger rising, but I try to keep it in check. I don't want to give him the satisfaction of getting a rise out of me. But it's hard to stay calm when he's being so mean and hurtful. As he continues to bully me, I can't help but feel my patience wearing thin. I'm tired of this, tired of being treated like dirt. I'm tired of being pushed around and bossed around. I'm tired of being made to feel like I'm nothing. I ignore him and walk out of the market, needing some fresh air to clear my head. I can't take this anymore. I need to get away from him and his toxic behavior. As I walk away, I can feel Swill's eyes on me, but I don't look back. I know he's just trying to get a reaction out of me, and I refuse to give him the satisfaction. I'm not going to let him win. I'm not going to let him break me. I'm becoming tired of this bully, tired of being treated like I'm nothing. I need to find a way to stand up for myself, to show him that I'm not going to take this lying down. I need to find a way to be strong and brave, to show him that I'm not afraid of him. I take a deep breath and keep walking, determined to find a way to overcome this bully and move on with my life. As I walked home from work, I couldn't help but think about my job. I loved my boss, he was a good man, but the rich bully, Swill, was making my life miserable. He wouldn't let me be, always finding ways to belittle me and make me feel small. I was getting tired of it, tired of feeling like I was nothing. I thought about resigning, about finding a new job where I could be treated with respect and dignity. But where would I go? What company would want to hire someone like me, someone with no experience and no connections? As I walked, I saw a vacancy sign in a big company's gate, personal assistant wanted, with a huge pay. I felt a spark of hope. Could this be the answer to my prayers? I made my way to the security post and asked about the vacancy. They let me in, and I was wowed by the size of the company. I imagined working there, being a part of something big and important. I sat down with the other candidates, waiting for my turn to be interviewed. One by one, they were called in, and I could feel my anxiety growing. What if I didn't get the job? What if I wasn't good enough? Finally, it was my turn. The manager looked at me for a while, then asked me to sit. He interviewed me, asking me questions about my experience and skills. I answered as best I could, trying to show him that I was the right person for the job. Just as he was about to finish, he got a call. He picked it up, and his expression changed from calm to surprised. He ended the call and turned to me. "Cordelia, you're hired. You're going to be the personal assistant to the CEO of this company." I was equally surprised and happy. I couldn't believe it. I had gotten the job. The manager smiled and told me that I would start immediately. He sent me up to the CEO's office, and I made my way there, my heart racing with excitement. As Cordelia walked down the passage, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and nervousness. She had just been hired as the personal assistant to the CEO of the company, and she was eager to start her new job. She made her way to the CEO's office, her heart racing with anticipation. She had no idea what to expect, but she was determined to make a good impression. As she approached the office door, she could feel her palms getting sweaty. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down, reminding herself that she was qualified for this job and that she had nothing to worry about. She knocked on the door, and a voice from inside told her to come in. She opened the door and stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room for the CEO. And then she saw him. Swill, the rich bully who had made her life miserable for so long, was sitting behind the CEO's desk. He was smirking at her, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Cordelia's eyes widened in shock as she stared at Swill. She couldn't believe it. What was he doing here? How had he become the CEO of this company? Her mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. She felt like she had been punched in the gut, like all the air had been knocked out of her. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. She was frozen in place, her eyes fixed on Swill's smirking face. Swill, on the other hand, seemed to be enjoying himself. He leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped behind his head, and watched Cordelia with a look of triumph. Cordelia's shock slowly gave way to anger. How dare he do this to her? She had thought she had finally escaped him, finally found a way to get away from his bullying and harassment. But now it seemed she was trapped. Trapped in a job with a boss who hated her, who wanted to make her life miserable. She felt a surge of determination. She was not going to let Godswill win. She was not going to let him bully her or harass her. She was going to stand up to him, to fight back and show him that she was not afraid. And with that thought, Cordelia's shock and anger gave way to a sense of resolve. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to fight for her place in this company and for her own dignity. But for now she just stood there, frozen in place, her eyes fixed on Godswill's smirking face. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. She was trapped in a moment of shock and disbelief, unsure of what to do next. As I stood there, frozen in place, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do, Godswill's voice jolted me out of my thoughts. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "I mean, you're standing there looking like you've seen a ghost," Godswill said, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "And I'm wondering, what's your decision? Are you going to work for me, or are you going to run away with your tail between your legs?" I felt a wave of resentment wash over me. How dare he? How dare he treat me like this? But I knew I didn't have a choice. I had already quit my previous job, and I had no other options. I had to accept this job, no matter how much I didn't want to. So I looked up at Godswill and I nodded. "I'll work for you," I said, trying to sound confident. Godswill's POV. I have this wicked smile on my face as I watch her battle within herself. I know she wants to decline, but I also know she doesn't have any choice. So I ask her, "What's your reply?" She nods and says, "I will work for you." I smirk, and my heart flutters at her. I have gotten a puppet for myself. I will surely make her regret this. I smile as I pass her a document on the table. It contains the rules she will abide by while she works for me. I watch her as she takes each step shakily towards the table, her eyes fixed on the document. She picks up a pen and signs, her hand trembling. I laugh out loud and say, "Excellent, I knew you'd see things my way. Welcome to the team, Cordelia. You're going to be my personal assistant, and you're going to do exactly as I say." I watch her as she looks up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and resentment. I know she's not happy about this, but I don't care. I have gotten what I want, and I will make sure she regrets ever crossing me. I watch her as she looks up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and resentment. I know she's not happy about this, but I don't care. I have gotten what I want, and I will make sure she regrets ever crossing me. I take a step closer to her, my eyes locked on hers. "You will do exactly as I say, Cordelia," I said, my voice low and menacing. "You will be my puppet, and you will dance to my tune. And if you don't, well, let's just say you won't be happy with the consequences." I smile as I watch her tremble with fear. I have won, and she has lost, and I will make sure she never forgets it. As I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the computer screen in front of me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over me. It was my first day as Godswill's personal assistant, and I was already feeling overwhelmed. My boss had given me a list of tasks to complete, and it seemed like an endless stream of work. I was supposed to answer his phone calls, manage his schedule, and complete various administrative tasks. But every time I thought I was making progress, Godswill would come over and give me even more work to do. "You're not working fast enough, Cordelia," he would say, his voice dripping with condescension. "You need to pick up the pace if you want to keep up with me." I felt like I was in a never-ending nightmare. No matter how hard I worked, it was never enough for Godswill. He was always finding fault with something, always telling me that I needed to do better. As the day wore on, I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Godswill was taunting me, giving me loads of work, and then criticizing me for not getting it done fast enough. I felt like I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of drudgery and frustration. But I knew I couldn't give up. I had to keep pushing through, no matter how hard it got, so I took a deep breath and kept working, trying to ignore Godswill's constant criticism and focus on getting the job done. But it was hard. Oh, it was so hard. Godswill was relentless, always pushing me to do more, always finding fault with something. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, never knowing when he would lash out at me next. As the day drew to a close, I felt exhausted. I have never worked so hard in my life, and I couldn't believe that I had to come back and do it all again tomorrow. But I know I had to keep going. This job is important to me. God swills POV. As I sat in my office, watching Cordelia work through the glass wall that separated us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had given her a mountain of work to do, and I knew she was struggling to keep up. But that was the point. I wanted to punish her, to make her suffer for daring to cross me, and what better way to do that than to give her an impossible amount of work to do? I knew that the work I had given her was meant for my secretary, but I had decided to give it all to Cordelia instead. I wanted to see her struggle, to see her sweat and toil and struggle to keep up. And so I watched her through the glass wall, a smirk on my face as she worked herself to exhaustion. I saw her yawn tiredly, her eyes drooping as she struggled to stay awake. I saw her rub her eyes, her shoulders slumping in defeat. But I didn't care. I was enjoying this, enjoying the power and control that I had over her. I was the boss, and she was just a lowly assistant, and I was going to make sure she knew it. As the hours ticked by, I checked my watch and saw that it was already 8 p.m. I packed up my files and stood up, walking over to Cordelia's desk. "Make sure you finish all of this work before you go home," I told her, my voice firm and commanding. Cordelia sighed tiredly and nodded, her eyes barely lifting off the screen. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the desperation, and I knew that I had won. I turned and walked back to my office, feeling a sense of triumph. I had broken her, had reduced her to a mere shell of her former self, and I knew that I would continue to do so until she was nothing but a mere puppet under my control. As I sat back down at my desk, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had won, and Cordelia had lost. And I knew that I would never let her forget it. I laughed, then picked up my stuffs and went out of the office.